Hey, it's good to be back on again. So, I got a lot of feedback about last week's Saturday afternoon video on Judges 19 and 20. If you weren't around, well, I will drop a link down in the comments here in a moment or two. And last week we talked about Judges 19 and 20, and it's the most grotesque story in the Bible. Absolutely horrifying case of abuse. Look at all my notes in there. See? Crazy. So, Judges 19 and 20 is a story about a guy with a concubine, and they were traveling. They stayed overnight in another village. There it is. We got the video link up to last week's video. And so the sum of the story, because you got to go watch that video if you want to hear all of the stuff about that. It's a long one. It's like 54 minutes, and it's a Bible study through one of the worst abuse stories. So this guy is afraid he's going to get assaulted by a bunch of people in this village where they're spending the night, a bunch of men. And so instead, to save his own skin, he shoves his concubine, which is like a second-class wife in that culture, out the door. They rape her all night long, and she dies the next morning. And after that, there's an investigation, and then there is an all-out civil war over justice against what was done to her. So and yet, at the same time, through all of that horrific Bible story, I believe that there are glimpses of God's heart of love and justice and protection that we each can see. So if you want to hear all about that, go watch the video links that are on your screen right now. But here's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the ways that we get outraged against injustice and abuse and discrimination, because you know what? I think a lot of times we really aren't outraged for the right reasons. So after last week, I got a lot of messages. I mean, it was quite the video. It was quite the Bible study. And it was quite the topic. So I got a lot of messages about people asking more questions about Judges 19 and 20, about the Bible study, about the story itself, wondering, like, one of the questions was, why on earth did 40,000 Israelite men have to die before they were able to conquer and get the victory over the men the soldiers from the tribe of Benjamin who were protecting the perpetrators? So basically, this woman had been gang raped for an entire night, and when there was an investigation, the rest of the 11 tribes of Israel came together and they said, hand over the perpetrators to the tribe of Benjamin. That was where the gang rape had taken place. And the tribe of Benjamin, who happened to be like the Navy SEAL elites, not Navy SEAL because they, not water warriors. Anyway, but the elite, like the tribe of Benjamin had 26,000 warriors. They took on 400,000 warriors from the rest of the 11 tribes. In 2 days, they killed 40,000 of them, and they only lost a couple hundred men. They were remarkable warriors. They were the elite of the elite. And so Israel ended up having to fight against their own most elite warriors because the tribe of Benjamin would not hand over the perpetrators of this horrific crime against this woman. And so I got questions from people asking me to kind of explore it deeper. One of the things was, why did 40,000 men have to die? Which is an excellent question. And the only thing I can think of, and this is not like a deeply theological response, this is just, this is what I think. So, I'm not writing a thesis on this, but I think it's because evil fights viscerally, fiercely to protect itself. The tribe of Benjamin could have been done by handing over the men who were guilty of the gang rape. Done. The end. Over. Finished. But instead they said, no, those are our men. we will protect them even though they are perpetrators of horrific abuse. And so that shows you that the mindset and the attitude of the entire tribe of Benjamin was that of protecting evil rather than exposing it and bringing it out into the light. So I believe that, God could totally have just snapped his fingers and wiped out the tribe, or he could have prevented any of the Israelites from being killed in battle against the Benjamites, but he didn't. And I don't know God's mind. I can't speak for God, but I can imagine that part of that is because of two things. One, that God was allowing it to be illustrated just how fiercely evil will fight to protect itself from being exposed to consequences and exposed to truth and justice. And two, remember, this woman was a concubine. She wasn't a full wife. She wasn't a proper wife. She was like a second wife, an extra. And I'm not saying that to shame her. I'm saying it to state how she was considered second class in the culture in which they lived. And God showed that she was still worthy of justice. Even a second-class woman, as they viewed her at that time, was still worthy of being vindicated after this horrific thing that had happened to her. She didn't have to be a first wife. She didn't have to be the wife of a wealthy man. She didn't have to be an externally valuable person. She was valuable and worth justice because she was a person. Now, here's the other thing, though. I don't think that everybody necessarily, even back then, and certainly not today, has that same motivation for fighting against injustice or for pushing back against abuse. I just don't see that. Here's I wrote it to some friends partway through the week as I was getting all these messages, like multiple people, all men, interestingly enough, was like, I don't know why they let the last 600 of the Benjamites die, because Israel wiped out the tribe of Benjamin, all the villages, right down to all the livestock. Almost 26,000, 25,000, and a couple hundred warriors were killed. Everything was burned to the ground, and there were 600 Benjamite men left. That's it. And all of the Israelites said, you don't get wives from us. So basically they were talking like they were going to make the tribe of Benjamin extinct. So I got messages from multiple men saying, I don't know why they let the last 600 Benjamites live. If it was me and I was back then, I would have just finished them all off. And I was sitting there thinking, well, that sounds really nice in theory, that you would have just brought justice all the way down to the end and you wouldn't have let anybody get away with it. But I think I was sitting there thinking to myself, I really think I need to do a video about how easy it is to get outraged about abuse from Judges chapter 19 and 20, like 4,000 years distant. Because it's really easy to be a vigilante when everything is very far away from you. And hey, by the way, if you're just coming on, if you're watching, would you please click share at the bottom and repost this? Because I got some really exciting stuff to share. Or, well, exciting? I don't know. I'm probably just going to piss people off. But it's still going to be exciting, and you're going to want to watch the comments afterwards. So if you would just click share at the bottom and post this over on your page, your profile, it will let more people watch and get the word out. That would be super awesome. Thanks. So yeah, I realized I need to do a video this Saturday about how easy it is to get outraged about abuse when it's far away from us or when it's somebody else's situation. I loved this particular tweet by my friend Jennifer Jill, who says some social justice warriors are really social media warriors who actually ignore social injustice in the real world. And when this started to stand out to me was when I realized that some of the men who were writing me and talking big smack about how they would have just wiped out the last 600 of the Benjamites for doing that, for protecting those abusers, I realized some of you guys, I've actually talked to you about, and I'm not saying this to you, I'm just saying, this is what was in my head. I've actually talked to some of these same men about real life abuse cases, and you know what their response was? Well, are you sure? Who saw it happen? Where's your proof? Now, I'm not saying that we should ever make allegations without proof or that we should falsely accuse anyone. That is not where I'm going with this. What I'm talking about is perpetrator bias. So it's really easy to be like, oh, I would have like finished them all off way back then. But when the person perpetrating abuse is your golfing buddy, are you outraged then? If this person happens to be your pastor, are you outraged then? Or are you absolutely certain that the victim or the other people must have misunderstood the intention? So, I just, there's this dissonance because some of these same people have looked me in the eyes during conversations and said, aren't you overreacting? Maybe they were just joking when they made that sexually completely inappropriate comment or come on. And I'm not talking about people where I'm the victim. I'm talking about actual real life cases that I'm working with where someone has been going through injustice and we need help. And yet those same individuals are outraged in theory at something that happened a long time ago, and they can think of all kinds of ways that they would have handled it better if they had lived back in those times. But that also happens though in things that we look at online. For example, just this week, in the same news cycle as some of the heinous Catholic abuse things that have been going on, I read an article about a church school administrator in Ocala, Florida. And he was coming on to a minor student at the church school. He offered to buy her to kiss her. He tried repeatedly to kiss her, to convince her to kiss him. He bought her clothes and a computer and a new phone, and he said he was going to marry her as soon as she turned 18. This man was 67 years old. The mother returned the gifts when she found out about the behavior, and when confronted by the victim's mother, now this is a child under the age of 18, when confronted by the victim's mother, this man told her not to bother calling police because they're not going to do anything anyway. And then once he was arrested, he told everyone, I was just joking. So here's the thing. It is never appropriate to joke about sexual misconduct. It's never appropriate, especially not with a minor, especially not as a church leader, but just never. Just never. I see a question coming up on my screen from Anna Quigley. Do you think that those who defend abusers do so because they are guilty of the same offense? Sometimes, not always. Or because of misplaced loyalty, giving loyalty to an unsafe person? Absolutely, many times. Again, not always. Or in denial, not wanting to admit that they were wrong about someone, not wanting harm to come to someone that they love, that being harm being the consequences of the abuse that was perpetrated. And how do we fix it? Wow, that is a loaded question as far as the how do we fix it. So I'm just going to kind of pause and sidestep here to answer Anna's question, because that is a fabulous question. Yes, I think that many, many times people who protect abusers are because they are the same mindset and they do not want others to, they don't want to be part of bringing consequences to someone for the same stuff they're secretly doing. That's not all the time, but it definitely happens, and it definitely happens in church faith community circles. Misplaced loyalty is absolutely a huge thing, because perpetrators of abuse do not groom just a victim. They groom the entire family and the church community. They make sure that they are well trusted, well liked, charming, appreciated, indispensable, and as a result, anyone who accuses or alleges any kind of inappropriate behavior is the person who looks like they're the crazy one, because everybody loves the perpetrator. So it is very easy for someone to inadvertently give misplaced loyalty. And then the last question is, again, this is like a yes, yes, and yes. It could be any combination of these. Absolutely, there is a sense of denial. Do you know why? Because we want to believe that we could recognize evil. We want to believe that if someone was really that bad, that they would hurt a child, or that they would take advantage of and exploit an innocent person, or that they would draw someone into a toxic relationship and use their power over them. We want to believe that we would be able to see it. And if we couldn't if we admit to ourselves that we cannot see it, that it happened right under our nose and we couldn't tell, then we are admitting something very, very scary about the world around us. And that is that the world around us is actually completely outside of our control. But you know what? When we realize that 1 in 25 people are sociopaths and have absolutely no conscience, how many hundreds of people do you know? That means you know multiple sociopaths. People who can do and get away with anything and not feel bad about it. They may fake feeling bad about it in order to maintain social awareness, but they don't actually have a conscience. And if you're interested in that, get the book by Marcia Stout called The Sociopath Next Door. Fabulous book. Hey, so I'm just going to ask you, if you're watching and you weren't watching a little earlier, would you mind hitting the share button underneath? I see some new people that have come on. Share it and like it, leave me a comment or hit a response there, and that totally pushes it out so Facebook can, let other people know that we're talking. So in this whole situation in Ocala, which just happened this last week, the guy says to the mom of his victim, it was only a joke and nobody's going to do anything about it anyway. But it is never appropriate to joke. I've actually gotten tagged in never appropriate to joke about sexual misconduct. Let me make that clear. I've actually gotten tagged in some posts with the video that is going around from the pastor who was boob grabbing Ariana Grande at, I believe, I haven't read and watched the whole thing, so somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that happened yesterday or last night at Aretha Franklin's memorial. Somebody drop me a comment. Am I right? Have you guys seen that? And so he's sitting here and she's like leaning way back, Ariana Grande is, and she's trying to get away from this guy who's completely handsy with her and got his arm wrapped around her, ready to grab her boob on the side, and it's on national television. And then I have people asking me, would you call that sexual assault? Would you call that appropriate behavior for a pastor? No, I would not call that appropriate behavior for a pastor. And if he's willing to do that in front of everyone, what's he doing behind closed doors? I'm just saying. So when we, oh my goodness, so much stuff I want to share. Okay, here's something good. Did you know in 1984, interesting. Wasn't there a book about that? Just kidding. 1984, a Fuller Seminary survey of 1,200 ministers showed that 1 in 5 conservative pastors admitted sexual contact with a church member outside of marriage. That's 20%. More than 2 in 5 of moderate pastors and fully half of those who claimed to be liberal in theology acknowledged sexual contact with a church member outside of marriage. That was back in 1984. That was before internet pornography. That was before being able to access a steady stream of sexual lasciviousness at the click of fingertips that is primarily and predominantly power-driven and violence-driven and incest-driven and exploitation-driven. That was way back then. How much more do you think we have dealing with people in church leadership, pastors, church teachers, class leaders, children's leaders today? So then here's the next question everybody asks. But isn't that a Catholic problem? Like, isn't that just like because priests are celibate and stuff and so they take advantage of little kids? Yeah, no, it's not. I want to drop a link in here from Boz Chivijian. This is an interview with Boz, who is actually the grandson of Billy Graham. He is also the founder of an organization called GRACE, Godly Response to Abuse in the Christian Environment. And so Boz talks about in this powerful article that he has come to recognize that so many churches do not have policies in place to deal with any accusations of abuse. And typically, do you know what churches do? They blame the victims for seducing the abuser. So in attempt to combat this, Boz Chivijian co-authored a book. I totally recommend this book, called The Child Safeguarding Policy Guide for Churches and Ministries, helping church leaders address difficult questions about predators in their communities and how to avoid further harming someone who's already been traumatized, which is extremely important. So that's some of the resources available. But again, isn't it a Catholic problem? I mean, we hear a lot in the news. Pennsylvania, most recently, is filled with horrifying information about large-scale cover-ups in the Catholic Church. But data indicates that we already know sexual abuse is one of the most underreported criminal offenses ever. Recent data indicates that more children are being abused within Protestant churches than even in the Catholic Church. One aspect of that is that there are way more Protestants and Protestant churches than there are Catholics. And two, Protestant churches are really decentralized, which means there's almost no solid way to gather reporting data because they don't have the central hub that the global infrastructure of a denomination that the Catholic Church does. So it's super important to share when speaking with Protestant audiences, because we've got Protestants, I happen to be a Protestant, Protestants have got to stop pointing fingers at the Catholic Church as though the Catholics are the ones with all of the abuse and injustice problems, and Protestants don't have that. That is simply not true. So in this now, I want to get back to the response that I had from last week's video. Another tweet, I was active on Twitter this week. Another tweet from my friend Jennifer Jill says, and I pushed back on her a little bit on this. So she's tweeted this week, the most civilized of men, when facing the specter of their wives or children being violated, suddenly believe in vigilante justice. Just an observation. That's what she said. So I wrote back to her, and you can go find this on our Twitter threads if you want. I asked, is that rooted in a sense of justice or in power and possession? If it's justice, then we should care about anyone being exploited unjustly. There's no just version of exploitation. I'm not sure why I said that way. We should be worried about anyone being exploited. Full stop. Period. If we only care when it's my wife, my child, then is it possible that it's more about messing with my property than actually justice? And I think this is actually a big, big part of what, not God's heart, but the cultural dynamics in that story about the concubine in Judges 19 and 20. The Levite wasn't mad that that she had been violated. He's the one who pushed her out the door to be gang raped. He wasn't mad that she'd been violated. He was pissed off that somebody messed with his property. He saw her as his possession, his thing. And if somebody had done the same thing to his donkey and killed his donkey, he would have been mad. That's not how God saw her. That's not how God sees us. But he, I don't think, was worried at all about her humanity and her personhood. He was just worried about his property. So now there is a third option, and that is that God wired men to protect their own and to feel justified in doing so. And you know what? I think protection is awesome. I think every healthy woman, and feminists, whatever, don't go hating on me on this, but I think every woman deep down in her soul wants to be protected, wants to be fought for, wants to be provided for. And I don't mean kept woman kind of thing. I can kill my own spiders and earn my own money. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this thing in the heart that you want to know that you are valuable to someone, that they would fight to protect you and keep you safe. But we do not want to be possessed, and God never intended women to be possessions of men because we are equal in personhood. Possession sometimes masks as protectiveness, but they are worlds apart, like the Grand Canyon of difference. Possession protects on the principle of it's mine. Protection is based on the principle of it's wrong. That means it doesn't matter if it's mine or not. It's wrong to treat a person that way. It's wrong to exploit someone. It's wrong to be sexually inappropriate or to harass someone or to abuse someone, to hurt someone who is innocent and vulnerable. It's wrong because it violates their personhood and it misrepresents the character of God to someone who is under the power that you have been given. We are always given power for the purpose of protecting those who have lesser power. not possessing them, not controlling them, not dominating them, not taking power over them, but power to protect and leave them in their free will personhood. It is so easy to sound super righteous from 4,000 years distant from Judges. It is so easy to be outraged about something that happens over there on the internet, way over there, and how dare they, and if they should just throw that person in jail forever. It's really easy. But you know what? Here's what I want to know. Where's your real life outrage on things happening in your location, in your church pews, in your neighborhood and community, in your parents' play groups, in your kids' school? Where's your outrage for those things? Or is it possible that some of the perpetrators of those things that you ought to be outraged about are actually your pals, and you don't want to believe that it could have happened for whatever reason? Is that even possible? And if it's possible, what are you going to do about that? How are you going to change that so that when someone speaks out saying they have been exploited, they are being abused, they feel unsafe, that you listen, that you consider it, that you give it due thought and care? Don't be a social justice slacktivist, typing all the outrageous things you would do in a Facebook comment. Stand up for the people right beside you who need an advocate. But wait, you say, what about Matthew 18? How can we really know? Shouldn't we make the abuse victim go back to the abuser and talk to them directly, privately, Well, you know what? Sam Powell is one of my new favorite Facebook people. And I don't think Sam has an actual Facebook page, so I can't tag him, but I'm going to send this to him later. And hopefully he'll see it and he will know that I am affirming him. He has written some amazing stuff. Just a quick reminder. This is what Sam Powell writes, and this is what I'm going to end on. Just a quick reminder. The Bible has a lot to say about interpersonal conflict and our covenants with one another. Matthew 18, everyone's favorite relationship conflict resolution text, teaches us how we are to deal with personal offenses with our brothers and sisters in Christ. Quote, if your brother sins against you, ... Matthew 18 has nothing to do with criminal activity, crimes against the church or the state, or wolves devouring prey. It has nothing to do with teachers of false doctrine, abusers of children, adulterers, murderers, or robbers. Those situations are dealt with than other biblical passages. There is more to the Bible and conflict resolution than Matthew 18. Wolves are cast out, false teachers are rebuked in front of all, heretics are rejected, criminals are reported to the state, and if someone entered my home, now this is Sam Powell talking, not me, I'm reading his words, if someone entered my home and killed my child, I would not need to go through the steps of Matthew 18 before calling the police, nor does Jesus require me to. Molestation, abuse, and false doctrine are just as deadly and just as criminal. We are called to judge righteous judgment, not hide behind the bushes with the wolves dressed in their fig leaves. We are supposed to be better than that, church. Now, Sam Powell also writes, I just was really loving Sam Powell's stuff this week. He says, I keep seeing professed Christians blaming assault victims. Well, look at what she was wearing. Well, what is she doing? How did she talk? Did she ask for it? So here's another reminder from Christian Ethics 101. You don't have the right to another person's body. Full stop. No, it doesn't matter what she is wearing. No, it doesn't matter if she had something to drink. Oh, but what if she's naked? Well, here's what Jesus said. When I was naked, you clothed me. That is Christian ethics, compassion, dignity, honor, and respect. Cover the naked with dignity and honor as image bearers of God. Jesus does not say you have, if they're naked, you have the duty or the right to leer, lust, molest, or fantasize. He says, cover. These are the basics. Any questions?